Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Corpus Christi. I'm Eli, and I'm honored to serve as your worship associate this morning. We welcome you to our worship service, celebrated here each week, mindful of the principles of our free faith. To describe a little bit about what Unitarian Universalism is, today I will share with you some words from Eric Ressley. Unitarian Universalists have different religious beliefs, but share a common faith. We know that life is holy, that each person is worthy, and that when we join together to plant the seeds of love, the world blossoms. Although we practice a free faith, it is also one that requires responsibility. We have a church covenant, which is a shared agreement that we recite together each week and reminds us of our closely held values. The mission of our church is, we learn, we lead, we love. So we have a...
Our meditation reading this morning is from Lynn Unger. "Breathe," said the wind. "How can I breathe at a time like this, when the air is full of the smoke of burning tires, burning lives?" "Just breathe," the wind insisted. "Easy for you to say if the weight of injustice is not wrapped around your throat, cutting off all air. I need you to breathe. I need you to breathe. Don't tell me to be calm when there are so many reasons to be angry, so much cause for despair." "I didn't say to be calm," said the wind. "I said to breathe. We're going to need a lot of air to make this hurricane together." I now invite you into some moments of silent contemplation. Today's reading and the essence of the sermon today comes from African-American Unitarian Universalist theologian, the Reverend Dr. Tandayeka. She received her PhD in philosophy and religion and theology from Claremont Graduate University, and she was given the name Tandayeka, which means beloved, by Archbishop Desmond Tutu in 1984. She's an ordained UU minister and congregational consultant, and she's also, before her religious career, is an Emmy Award-winning TV producer. And in terms of her scholarly work, she is known as the founder of something called Affect, that's A-F-F-E-C-T theology, which studies religious experience from the standpoint of emotions. So I'm going to try my best to explain some of that today. Would be better if she would be here, but you got me. This is her reading. "There was an extraordinary range of personal beliefs among the participants in my 2003 small group workshop in Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic. They were the delegates, staff, and visitors attending the annual meeting of the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists. Some were self-defined Christians, others were humanists. Some did not define themselves as religious at all. And one participant, a self-identified Unitarian, believed that Jesus is not only God, but also believed that he died to save a sinful humanity, was resurrected on the third day, and now is seated at the right hand of God. Clearly, a common set of religious ideas and beliefs was not the unifying factor for this gathered community. Rather, our Unitarian Universalist and Unitarian Universalist doctrinal freedom was writ large. Each participant drew on different theological and/or scientific sources to explain their own experience of a change of heart that occurred within this small group workshop, within this community setting of care and compassion we created together. Many persons described a heightened sense of awareness accompanied by a deep and abiding sense of peace, relaxation, and a cessation of inner turmoil. All were amazed by the variety and diversity of ideas participants used to express what the small group experiences they had created together meant to them individually. The participants could freely draw on different theological and scientific resources to interpret and express the change of heart. This doctrinal freedom is the intellectual signature of our liberal faith tradition because it sanctions our theological diversity as members of the same religious community. Now I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing our next hymn, Just as Long as I Have Breath. So the idea for this week's sermon came from a Southwest UU ministers retreat I attended recently, and it was Tandayika who led us in a 2-day workshop called Love Beyond Belief, Practicing the Heart of Our Liberal Faith. And the workshop, in accordance with her scholarly work, focused on using our own personal experience to form our religious thoughts and feelings. Tandayika said some theists, for example, cite personal experience to affirm the sanctity of God. Humanists, on the other hand, use personal experience to affirm the sanctity of human life. Others among us use personal experiences to affirm their pagan, Buddhist, agnostic, Christian, or Judaic claims about the fundamental nature, value, and meaning of our lives. And still others use personal experience to define themselves simply as Unitarian Universalist. So the stated purpose of the workshop was to use reason and emotional intelligence to guide our investigation of personal experience. And the goal was to strengthen personal experiences that enhance our ability to stand strong on the side of love. So the goal was to make our personal experiences of a higher quality, a better quality, to know more about them, so we can be these loving people we say we are, right? And much of the rest, that was pretty much the whole lecture part of the workshop. The rest was exercises, which I know if you've ever been to a workshop with a lot of experiential exercises, it can get a little weird and uncomfortable, right? But we would have all these experiences, whether we were comfortable with them or not. Then we would analyze them and then share our conclusions in small or larger groups. And so for the first exercise, we were divided into small groups, and we each had about 20 minutes to develop a skit that we later had to perform for the rest of the class. And in this skit, everyone in the skit had to be furious, but the only emotion we were allowed to display was politeness, meaning that we couldn't show any anger or any negative sentiment. So we had to portray people who are really angry, pretending not to be really angry. Yeah. So the skit that stands out for me the most was one that depicted the supermarket checkout line. Yeah, you know where this is going. You know, when the person in front of you has a zillion items and the cashier is a trainee and the customer would rather talk to the cashier and everyone else in line rather than kind of help move things along. And of course, everyone else in the growing line is trying hard not to say or do anything rude while they wait and they wait and they wait. So you can imagine how this played out. So what is the point of all this, portraying fake politeness in a skit? We were wondering the same thing. Well, it showed me that fake politeness isn't really something unfamiliar to any of us, that we really kind of do it a lot. And, you know, it comes naturally to just about everybody. But I learned when people are being fake polite that problems really don't get solved and people don't really relate to each other on a meaningful level. And fake politeness may think we're avoiding conflict and it's just easier that way, but it does really come at a cost. What is it doing to us when our behavior doesn't match our thoughts and our feelings? We've all met people who have been taught, or by necessity have had to hold all of their feelings inside. Men, for instance, have often been taught, of a certain generation, have often been taught to hold their feelings inside. They present the stoic game face day after day, year after year, and this can often become a pathological thing, so that all of the skills and practices of emotional expression are lost. And with losing the ability to express yourself emotionally, you lose the ability to connect with people on an emotional level, and you lose the ability to find meaning and purpose, and you actually lose part of your own humanity. When our thoughts and our feelings are out of sync with our behavior and our actions, because of this emotional stuntedness, it's really hard to stand on the side of love. So much to our chagrin, later in the day, we had to do yet another skit. And this time we had to act out the worst possible, but well-meaning greeting of new people at church. And we weren't just picking on, the assigned greeters. We were picking on everybody who greets anybody new at church. And watching skit after skit, they were chock full of demonstrations about exactly how frenetic our pre-service time is at our churches. By seeing it enacted over and over again by groups, a lot rang true to me. How some congregations whisk visitors' children off to a mysterious land called R.E., how we need to calm down and slow down and really take time to listen to new people and meet them where they are and not overwhelm them with what might be superficial friendliness. In our greeting and just about everything we do together, we need to engage with each other more deeply and less superficially. And it's hard to do at coffee hour when it's crowded and loud, and that's just not really conducive to deep human connection. But all the superficiality that we do in our daily lives, it doesn't really help us. If we truly value personal experience in our religion and in our lives, can we really afford to skim the surface when it comes to human interaction? So this is one reason we recently started small group ministry. We have 2 groups known as chalice circles going on right now. And when done well, these groups create a sacred space in which people have time to really express themselves without others' interruptions or opinions immediately thrown into the mix. Because that's the way we live our lives, with everyone's input and opinions, isn't it? We rarely get to speak and really be heard, and therefore really be understood. And a lot of these chalice circle practices were modeled in the workshop we took. After each exercise, we shared 1 sentence reflective statements with members of our small group. Each person shared their statement, either reading it once or twice, and then we had to sit in 5 seconds of silence. That can be hard, actually. And then we were not allowed to comment on the thing we just heard. How crazy is that, right? when you're just dying to respond to someone's, if you like their comment and saying, oh, I agree with you, and you can't say that. But that way, all statements were really listened to, and they had the opportunity to stand on their own as something given by this person instead of something that falls into this giant category called commentary. And there's a reason why the practice of listening without comment is so valuable. Let me ask you, if you're participating actively in a discussion, what are you thinking about when another person is talking? I might dare to say that 50% of your mental energy is spent on thinking about what you're going to say next, right? And maybe only 50% is listening to the person who's talking. So you can kind of see how this might not really be productive. It detracts from deep listening. A room full of people half focused on what they will say next, rather than deeply listening to what others are saying. And now discussion has its purposes. We do have to have interaction discussion. But we human beings have a really strong desire to be heard and understood, and these opportunities are exceedingly rare in our lives. So our next exercise was in something called pausing, P-A-U-S-I-N-G, pausing. And you all actually get to participate in this one, but it won't be weird or embarrassing, I promise. So I'm going to hold up two objects. One is a pen, and one is a set of eyeglasses. When I hold up the pen, I'm going to ask you to focus your attention on the pen. And when I hold up the glasses, I'm going to ask you to focus your attention on the glasses. And I'll do this alternately. And after a while, start to focus on the place between the pen and the eyeglasses. Okay? All right, here we go. This is going to be really exciting. All right, experiment over. I hope no one tuned into our live stream right at that moment, because that would be appear really bizarre. So what was happening in your mind during the transition point between the pen and the glasses? If you were keeping your focus and not thinking about the potluck coming up, people are denying that? No potluck thoughts? Okay. So if you were focusing, you probably weren't thinking about much at all in the transition point between the pen and the glasses. And as it turns out, this transition point actually has theological significance. This transition point has been called the natal hour, that's N-A-T-A-L, like related to birth, the natal hour of everything living in religion. I'll say that again. The natal hour of everything living in religion is the transition point. So the theologian who said this is a gentleman named Friedrich Schleiermacher. Absolutely impossible to spell. He lived from 1769 to 1834, and he is known as the father of liberal theology, the theological tradition from which we come. Schleiermacher called that transition point, that mental pause we take between events, the null point of consciousness. Okay, transition period, nothing's going on in your brain, the null point of consciousness. And he said it's a time when the mind is not defining things or experience. So at this transitional pause moment, absolutely everything is present. He said it's a time when the infinite cosmos is stirring us from distraction. Isn't that beautiful? Infinite cosmos is stirring us from distraction. And at this time there is simultaneous emptiness because our brains are empty, and fullness because we are receptive to all there is. To Schleiermacher, this transition point between thoughts was a mystical experience, when one could experience infinity in a finite moment. So taking this even further, Schleiermacher said religion is a cultural construction built around getting to the pause experience, this moment of transcendence. Okay, so religion. Okay, this is kind of radical. He was a liberal Christian German. Religion is a cultural construction built around getting to that experience, that pause experience, that experience of the transcendental experience. In this pause, we may feel interconnectedness, peace, and wonder. And it's in this pause space, this transcendent space, that a lot of people experience the presence of what they call God. By now, these ideas by Schleiermacher may be beginning to sound a little bit familiar, a lot like Buddhism and other spiritualities that incorporate mindfulness and meditation. Doesn't that transition point he's talking about, that pause, sound a lot like the mental space we try to get to in meditation, right? Emptiness of the mind. So yes, Schleiermacher, the German Enlightenment-influenced liberal Protestant, got to the very same place using a Western European frame of thinking. So Schleiermacher, in 1799, we learn about this in seminary in our liberal theology class. He's famous for publishing something called On Religion, Speeches to Its Cultured Despisers. So he was on the side of religion, definitely. And it may sound shocking, but he had to defend religion in Europe against its Enlightenment critics. Yes, Europeans, scholarly ones, were openly criticizing religion around the turn of the 19th century. But Schleiermacher said religion was not a philosophy or an abstract metaphysical thought or natural science or adherence to dogma, but the sense and taste for the infinite. Yet another definition of religion, a sense and taste for the infinite. Religion is a desire to connect with something larger than ourselves. Schleiermacher saw religious feelings as responses to an infinite, eternal reality. He held that it is always through one's experience of the whole interconnecting realm of the finite that there comes a sense of dependence upon the infinite ground of all things. So around the same time Schleiermacher was doing his thing, in the early 1800s, when Unitarians didn't really officially exist yet, in America at least, certain liberal ministers of the Standing Order churches, the precursor to the Unitarians, they started reading Schleiermacher. And they were influenced by his writings, as well as other liberal, religious, and philosophical scholars in Europe. And they began to see the importance of personal feelings and personal experience in religion. And they believed that maybe Jesus was not the Son of God and Savior, but perhaps a great teacher who lived in that transition space, a place of higher consciousness, which may be called God consciousness. So some of these liberal musings of the ministers of the Standing Order did not set well with some of the more orthodox clergy. And after much agony and dissension, the liberal ministers finally claimed the derogatory name Unitarian, one that was imposed upon them, they did not choose. They claimed the term, and congregations began to take sides, Unitarian or not. Some became Unitarian, others became known as Congregationalist, and some congregations split down the middle. So the point is that the Unitarians didn't become Unitarians just for not believing in the Trinity. No, they weren't so excited about the Trinity, but that's really not a driving force. It was about their rational Enlightenment thinking and receptivity to new ideas of scholars like Schleiermacher, who experienced the value of the individual personal experience and feelings. And it resonated with the liberal Standing Order ministers who later became Unitarians. And you can see why all this Unitarian liberal stuff is dangerous to orthodoxy. If religion is only a cultural construction to achieve a feeling of connection, purpose, oneness, whatever you may call it, maybe you can do this without the Bible, without Jesus, without God. There may be many ways to do this. And so that can be seen as a veritable slippery slope into heresy. And I have to say, 200 years later, we've kind of hit the bottom of that slope, and here we are. But yet, our workshop odyssey did not end there. There was yet another exercise, and you'll be really glad you don't have to do this one. Each of us had to chew a tiny piece of baby carrot 60 times and pay attention to the experience. And this was like maybe 1/3 of a baby carrot. It's pretty small to get 60 chews out of it. And I have to tell you, after 60 chews, there was no discernible carrot material left in my mouth before I actually got to swallow. So after the exercise, we were asked to describe our carrot experience within 4 categories: sensations, emotions, ideas, and affects. We described sensations like crispy, juicy, emotions like I hate carrots and I'm afraid I'll have to swallow this darn thing before 60 chews. We shared ideas like maybe I can get a sermon out of this whole carrot thing. And affects, which describe the intensity of this experience. So some affects were some were you know. But this whole exercise was to demonstrate the point that we use all 4 aspects, the sensation, emotion, ideas, and affects of experience to make our experiences all the time. It's these aspects of experience each of us combine and mix together in our minds in our own proportions, in our own individual way, to create our personal lived experience. We are the sifter and the mixer and the filter of experience. And when we pause, getting back to that pause, that transcendent, that transitional point, we actually have the ability to see our mixer at work and how we're putting these things together that form the experiences we have. And some people say at that point, when you can analyze your mixer and know how your mixer is working, we can see our true self. So at the end of the workshop with Tandayika, we were asked to write a simple takeaway. This is what I wrote. We crave spirituality, the pause, the moment of connection, the moment of oneness, even when we don't know it, even when we think it doesn't exist. But you know, there are more takeaways here. Unitarian Universalism draws from 6 sources. And the first source, and many say the most important source, is, I'm quoting it directly, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. First source, direct experience of transcending mystery. Sounds a little like the pause, doesn't it? Our first source is the pause. And it turns out that direct experience is not just something that happens to us. In our minds, through our emotions, through all there is, we create our own experiences. Yes, things happen in the world that are external to us and that we have no control over. But how we experience them is something that happens inside us. How we behave to others and with others is part of direct experience. But some of those behaviors we're culturally trained to do, inauthenticity and feigned politeness, relating to people on superficial levels, feeling one way and acting another, suppressing feelings, not stopping to listen, not pausing, all get in the way of that transcendent experience we're all seeking. And I think we can pretty much agree that we need peace and connection now more than ever. We need to be able to really see and hear one another and move in one direction together in all of our theological diversity. So it's time to get real. It's time to go deep. So that together our spirits are continually renewed and we can carry on as life-affirming, justice-affirming, and love-affirming people. May this be so. Our closing words are from James Hobart. As we depart from one another, let our hearts be secure through every human season. Let our hearts be secure in seasons of anguish as in seasons of joy, in seasons of failure as in seasons of success, in seasons of uncertainty as in seasons of security. Let our hearts be secure in this dual reality. We are worthy recipients of love and support we can never earn. And we are worthy providers of love and support others cannot earn. Let our hearts be secure, for hearts know and understand and will respond if invited in.